Good morning, board members. Good morning, staff. Good morning, visitors. And good morning to a beautiful day in Utah. We are always happy for that moisture, but it looks like we're going to have a new friend out there called the sun, and that's a good thing. We are getting started on our finance committee meeting this morning. We have a wonderful agenda, and we're going to get started. Our first item is our public comment, and Mr. Royce Van Tassel is here, and he asked to be placed right before the action item, and I assume that the action item that you wanted to speak to was R277479, dealing with charter schools, which is the item that we're right before. So am I correct, or should I not have made that assumption, Royce?
No, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay, we'll turn the time over to you.
I appreciate that. I just have a couple of minor technical and I hope clarifying suggestions on R27479. And they're not designed because I think anyone today misunderstands the language that's being proposed. I'm sort of thinking about what happens 5 years from now when a lot of us who may or may not be around and want to just make sure that the language is particularly clear. And so on line 77, the current language says the superintendent shall adjust the WPUs for the actual number of students with disabilities, blah, blah, blah. And the WPUs, I think, is a little more over-inclusive than is certainly intended. I think that it would probably read better, be more precise if it said adjusted the number of special education add-on WPUs. That's what we're really talking about in this section. Similarly, over on line 111, the current language proposed says the superintendent shall adjust the WPUs. Again, that seems a little overly broad. I would again add that language, the number of special education add-on in there between the and WPUs. And then I would suggest that you add between the word the and actual just after that, so that it would read for the increase in enrollment due to the actual number of students with disabilities. That again reflects the specificity of the changes that are being contemplated in these two sections. This isn't something to live or die on, but it is designed to say, let's be a little bit more precise so that there isn't ambiguity in the future when some of us are going to turn over.
Okay, thank you very much. Is Associate Superintendent Leah Voorhees on with us?
I am here, Chair.
Did you hear those comments, and would you like to tell us how this would impact or what you think about those particular changes?
I agree. They're technical changes. Actually, I think it would be better though if the finance staff, Neil Stevens or Dale Frost commented, since they're the ones that do the calculations.
Okay, let's have one of them on then.
Chair, I could respond.
That would be great, Dale. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. The first change, clarifying that these are the WPUs for the special education add-on, that is a very good change. That's the intention of the rule. I wanted one clarifying question on lines 111 and 112 to Mr. Van Tassel, if I may, Chair. May I ask him a question to clarify?
Yes, thank you.
Royce, was the intention of your other change to say that WPUs can only be adjusted up for increases? Do you get my
No.
question?
Having to think about that.
Do you get my
Would
question?
Oh, I understand your
change in
point.
enrollment?
I understand your point. If there were a decrease, however, in this case, we're talking about a significant expansion. That's what is contemplated in section 6. And so I would assume it's difficult to imagine a scenario where that wouldn't be, you add grades, but have fewer students with an IEP. Does that make sense?
Well,
Chair,
the comparison in practice, the comparison isn't to the baseline, it is to the projection. If and so let's say we're projecting you're adding 400 students, let's say 100 of them are projected to be special education students. And in reality, in October 1, instead of 100 students, we have 90, then you would adjust the WPUs down to reflect 90. So that's my one question. I'm fine with adding specificity for, so that we have clarity on that. I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding the intention.
I think that's a fair point, Dale. I was just trying to be precise, frankly, make this a little clearer. Rather, this wasn't an attempt to artificially ratchet anything.
Right, and I didn't think so, and that's why I really appreciate the friendly amendments. Can you can I hear your suggested language on 11 and 12 again for
Sure.
the increase?
Sure. So I said between the words the and actual, say increase in enrollment due to the actual number of students with disabilities.
Can we just change increase to change, or
Yeah, I think that would work. Sure.
If I may, Chair.
Yes, sir. Go
Ben
ahead.
Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. I've marked up a draft based on the one change from Royce. As the rule writer, I think it would be clearer to leave the second part the same, but if the committee wants to make a change there, I'm happy to mark that up to reflect what you're trying to do. But I think the way the rule is written on the change on the October 1st count, that it's clear as is.
Okay, thank you for that input. Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, I reached out to our state charter board leadership on this, and they said they were going to send some changes to Ben and Angie. I just want to double check if these are the same changes. And if I may be a little informal, Chair, I would say to Mr. Van Tassel, I don't think you're ever going to turn over. I think you will be an eternal advocate forever. I can't imagine doing this work without you, honestly.
I agree.
You all need to imagine a much happier time.
I know. And no, I just thought that was funny when you said that. Anyway, if we could just double check with Director Rasmussen and Deputy Stallings, I just want to make sure that we're covered with what the charter board leadership was thinking as well.
So the charter school board, if I may, Chair,
Yes,
they
sir.
have not sent anything to me. I'm happy to check with Angie to see if they've sent anything to her that she hasn't forwarded it along. But I was the rule writer identified in the memo, and they did not communicate with me.
Okay,
Okay, she said she sent something to you. So, okay, thank you.
thank you. At this point, I am not seeing any additional hands.
So we're still technically on public comment. Do you want?
Correct, we are. You're right. Sorry about that. Oh, thank you so much for keeping me on track. Okay, so let's open this meeting with our business. And I also forgot to introduce myself. My name is Kristen Norton. I'm the chair of the Finance Department. And could we have the other members introduce themselves as well? Starting with Vice Chair Davis.
Cindy Davis, District 11. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Chair Moss.
Jim Moss, District 12.
Great. Board Member Straight.
Brent Straight, District 3.
All right. And Board Member Bogus.
Yeah, Christina Bogus, District 8.
Thank you. Board Member Bogus, could you put your district number before your name so you pop up at the top of my list? Thank you. And Board Member and Chair Moss, if you would do the same thing. Thanks. All right. Okay, so our first item of business is item 2 on our agenda. It is the funding of charter school students with disabilities on an IEP. This is an amendment to Rule R277479. We've just heard some public comment and dialogue between our board and Royce Van Tassel of the Charter School Association. And I also see that we have Neil Stevens. I noticed you had your hand up. Did you want to make a comment as well?
No, Dale Frost addressed my comment, so we're good.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Board members, are there any, is there any input that you would like to make on this? Any questions or comments you would like to make? Okay. Do we have someone that would like to propose that amendment that was made by Mr. Van Tassel?
So the draft, if I may, Chair, that I put on the screen is draft 2, if that's would be part of his amendments. I did not add specific language on changing the October 1 count, but if you want to adopt just the language on the special ed add-on, that would be draft 2, and we can certainly add in other amendments if the committee sees fit.
Okay. Mr. Straight, go ahead.
Well, I listened to the comments made by both the chair and vice chair during public comment. I'd like to hear more discussion to that during at this point. I don't think that's been completely resolved in my mind.
And did you want to add some comment in on that, Brent, or would you like to hear more from staff?
I would like to hear more from staff, but especially Board Member Davis brought up a couple points. Dale Frost brought up a couple points. And I think we need to at least address those points at this point. This is the proper time to do that, because I don't have any comment myself beyond that.
Okay, thank you. Addressing the point of adding in, for clarity purposes, that when we talk about adjusting the WPUs, originally it says adjust the WPUs for the actual number of students, when in particular, in this particular rule, we're talking specifically about the special education students. And I felt like it was also a good addition, as did Mr. Frost, that we make that more specific and say adjust the number of special education add-on WPUs, because that's the part that would be adjusted based on that during that first year of funding. Board members, do you have any thoughts on the second one? Mr. Van Tassel requested information or to add specificity later on in the document, and Mr. Frost suggested that it probably was not needed, and we could just again add the number of special education add-ons that should be included. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Stevens.
So let me add some context here. The reason for this rule change is because there is a great difference between these Common Data Committee estimates for.
Can I stop you right there? Could you tell us in your position?
I apologize. I am the Special Education and Fiscal monitor and manager of all special education fiscal matters.
Great, thank
So-
you.
The context is that there's a large discrepancy between the Common Data Committee estimates for new expanding charter schools and their actual enrollment of special education students. Because we base this off ADM, that is at a lag. We don't get the ADM until August of the following school year. Oftentimes, the ADM comes in much lower than our estimates. For example, Career Academy of Utah last year estimated nearly 500 students would be enrolling for this current school year, and they received less than 100 students. So if we base on the rule, our old methodology of funding these, we're funding on 500 students, estimating that 10% will be special education students. So they're getting WPUs on 50 students. When they have less than 100 students, they should be funded on 10 students for special education. And so that creates a large discrepancy in the funding and builds up their balances that they are unable to spend down because they don't have the eligible students to spend those funds on. And this has contributed to our large special education balances, especially in the charter world. Last year, I did some data estimates and studies on the difference between the funding levels that we actually funded and what they should have been funded on. And for expanding charter schools, they receive on average 24 WPUs in excess of their students over a 5-year span. For new charter schools, the excess is a lot less, it's about 7.5. But that also is we're in that study time frame, Spectrum Academy is in there. So that kind of skews the results because they're a special ed specific school. But this is the background of why we're here, is because we're trying to eliminate these excess funding that puts charter schools in this scenario where they have more special education funds and students. And hopefully with this proposed rule, we can be able to more actively fund these LEAs.
Thank you so much. Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to provide a little more context as to the timing of this as well. Mr. Stevens mentioned the problem. The opportunity to fix this came from, so House Bill 113 that passed not this session, but the session before, updated the special education add-on formula, basically moving it up a year. And so this year was the first year in which we had a mid-year update for the special education add-on formula. In years past, what was provided in the legislative estimates before the year, that didn't change because it was based on older data that didn't change. So now that we have an update in the middle of the year, we can do what is proposed here, which is to true up to actual students, where we didn't have that opportunity before. I just wanted to provide that context as well. It helps us to address the balance issues that Mr. Stevens talked about. But the reason being is that because of that bill change, we are now able to true up to actual students in this formula. And that's the main purpose of these changes, so that we can do that according to rule.
Thank you so much. Chair Moss.
Thanks. I should know this, but when you're at an average of 24% above actual enrollment, what happens to that money? How do they deal with that balance?
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
That balance has to stay on their books. They can return it to the state board if they wish to, and that goes in the Uniform School Fund, but none have done so far. So it sits there as a balance on their books, and they get only used on special education students. SB 178, and I think in the fiscal 21 session, allow them to take 35% of the allotment or the allocations, not the balance, and move it into unrestricted uses. But prior to that, they essentially had to sit with the funding until they had an eligible expense for that funding. And we found cases of some charter schools having 3 times their annual expenditures in carry forward funding. We put forth plans to address that, to have them spend down those funds within a 3-year time period to a certain percentage amount, which in our board rule says is 20%. If they can't spend down below 20%, then those funds come back to the state board.
After what period? Sorry, Chair, could I follow up?
Yes, sir.
3 years. So it's 3 years. So the end of this year. So after the end of this fiscal year, we could start recapturing funds that are on their books that exceed 20% of their balance.
Got it. And Chair, one final, if I could just clarify, what was that Senate bill?
Excuse me?
Sorry, I just didn't catch the bill, the Senate bill on the 35.
I think it was SB 178.
Okay, that's not the Fillmore flexibility bill. That's a different.
Yes, it is. That is.
It's that one? Okay, thank you. I think 191, but okay, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis.
Since somebody, Chair Moss brought up the 20% rule, I think, and this is not the time to do it, obviously, but in a future meeting, I think we need to look at considering lowering 20%, because that 20% keeps resurfacing for special education funding as well. Some LEAs have 20% carry forward, so we're not going to increase special education funding, when in reality, it's not enough for many of the LEAs that have really intensive needs in their LEAs. For example, one district last year had to substitute, or the year before, $4 million just to meet special ed IEP needs on top of the funding they received. So again, it's a bit adjacent, and I'll just leave the comment at that, but it's something we need to think about for the future.
Thank you so much. Mr. Straight.
Yeah, so I guess my question is some of this money can be transferred into different categories? Did I misunderstand that? I was a little confused by that.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, member Straight, the Senate bill was passed in fiscal 21 and continued, and also passed in this year's supplemental appropriation bill that allowed LEAs to transfer up to 35% of their yearly allotments out of any restricted funding source into an unrestricted funding source if they wish. And this pertains to state funds only in the basic program. So for those, it's going to be mostly your special ed funds, your CTE funds, some of your special below line programs that also qualify for this flexibility in using these restricted funds in unrestricted manners.
So with that flexibility, does this create a situation where LEAs may over-project in order to receive additional funds that they can then transfer into other accounts or uses?
I don't believe so, because the projections have to be finalized by the Common Data Committee that is comprised of many different members in the different entities within the state government system, including tax commission, and the legislative offices. And so they can't just submit a number to us and say this is what we want. There has to be an agreed upon amount that we use for projections. And that's why we're here also, is to true up what they project versus what they actually have on October 1 count, so they're funded for accurate students on their books.
Mr. Frost.
Yeah, Chair, if I may just add to that, LEAs do not provide their own projections. So the Common Data Committee is made up of the Office of the Legislative Fiscal Analyst, the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, the Tax Commission, USBE. So I serve on that committee, and we do our very best to project. But as Mr. Stevens had mentioned, with new charter schools, it's difficult to project enrollments in general, that much more difficult to project what percentage are special education students. Same thing with satellite campuses. So we do our best, but because we now have the opportunity to true up to actuals, I think the context of that flexibility, it's really an adjacent issue, but it does matter in this, that we're trying to minimize unused balances to the extent possible. And this allows us to do that because we're not funding for students that don't materialize in projections. If this passes, if that makes sense. And then if for example, we under project, then we would increase that. That was the context for me asking questions from Mr. Van Tassel, which is it could go either way. We could be, you could be under projections or over projections. And that's why I was asking the question about his use of the word increase.
Vice Chair Davis.
Sorry, my phone was frozen for a minute. I apologize. I need to take my hand down, but my screen is freezing up on me.
No problem. So you do not have a question?
I don't. As long as the changes are technical and don't change things substantively, which is what Vice Chair Phillips had told me earlier, and I don't know if these are the same changes. So if our finance folks are okay, I'm okay to move forward. If we need to adjust it some to make sure it's very clear, then that's okay too.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
Vice Chair Phillips was at the same meeting with Royce where we were talking about those, and she did say she supported these changes. So I think she may have been talking, if it was Vice Chair Phillips you talked to Board Member Davis, I think we're probably talking about the same thing here.
Chair, may I?
Yes,
Yes, it was her. So thank you.
thank you. Board Member Straight.
Yes, I appreciate the explanation. I'm ready to move on, and I'll make that motion if you'll bring it up
Okay.
for me.
Can we put that vote up and then and that motion up? And I think we're amending that to say draft 2. Is that correct?
Let's see here. I move that the committee approves R277-479 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
So if you want Mr. Van Tassel's edits, it would be draft 2.
Oh,
Now, do we
Let me
have
see
both of
here.
those edits in draft 2? Or just yours?
I just had the special ed add-on edits, and then if we wanted to put specific different language on how the count would be figured, we'd have to figure that out. But draft 2 would change it from WPU to special education add-on WPU.
Okay. Okay. So can you change that, Brent, to draft 2?
yeah. Do I need to state the whole thing again? I'll just state it. Not a
Okay.
problem.
That'd
I
be good.
move the committee approves R277-479 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay, so the motion before the board is that the committee approves R277-479 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. As the maker of the motion, do you have any other comment?
No.
Okay. Board members, go ahead and please vote.
Member Bogus stepped away for just a second.
Okay, is Chair Moss still here?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Oh, there's your vote. Sorry, I didn't see your vote
All
there
right.
for a minute. Okay, that looks like that passes unanimously with Board Member Bogus absent. Okay. Thank you very much for your input on that and your great questions and responses, staff. All right. Our agenda item 2.3 is an action item on Rule 277-607. Attention. Sorry, I am having a mouth and brain disconnect this morning. Attendance promotion and chronic absenteeism prevention amendment. And it looks like Director Rasmussen will
Yeah, if I
lead the
may.
way on this.
So I have one other rule to present to the committee, and that's this one, R277-607. This comes as a result of legislative changes during our last session. You'll see that there's a couple of things that we're kind of doing in this rule. First, we're changing the terminology a little bit. You'll see the rule has been, the recommendation is to change the title of the rule and kind of the language used throughout the rule. We've added some definitions to kind of go along with that, namely we've got definitions for chronic absenteeism and intervention, and then they've got updates to what the policies should look like for promoting good attendance and preventing chronic absenteeism. So the content expert that you have today is Aspen Florence. She's the specialist that works on absenteeism and has been working on this rule with me. And she would be available to answer any questions that you have on the substance of the rule changes.
Thank you so much for that. Aspen, would you like to walk us through any substantive changes? Ooh, I'm not even talking anymore today. Rules changes that you think we need to hear about first?
Okay, sorry, unmuting is difficult.
Yes, it is.
Prevention. Technology is always hard. Prevention specialist in the area of absenteeism and attendance. And just quick changes on this is a shift in language from strictly absenteeism and truancy to promotion of attendance. We're hoping to kind of broaden our language around promoting attendance rather than just reacting to non-attendance. Other changes are just more guidance around what a school's attendance team should look like in that kind of foundational pieces of what a school can be doing to address attendance in their LEA. And then also some more guidance around what should and can fit into an attendance policy for a school.
Thank you so much.
One thing, if I may add, Chair, that I
Yes.
neglected to mention, we did post a draft too, based on some questions that we got from the field, namely as to on line 84 here, what that two-way perspective term meant. Staff felt that by changing that to family and student perception, that would be more clear to the people that work in this area. So that would be the change in draft 2, and that's the draft that we recommend the committee adopt.
Great, thank you so much. Board Member Bogus, you have a question or comment?
I have to unmute me.
Yeah. So I'm talking through Member Moss's computer so we don't echo.
Okay,
Okay, so I do have a couple questions. I believe they are for Mr. Rasmussen. And so can I direct my questions to him, Chair?
that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. So Mr. Rasmussen, on line 47, it says promotes regular attendance and resolves. And maybe it's semantics, but to me, that implies that resolution is possible in every situation, and sometimes inside our buildings, it's simply not. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about a language change to something such as makes every effort to resolve.
I will just say that we're trying to be concise. I see your point. I think it's, you know, as a rule writer, it's probably how I would write it. But if you think it needs to be more technical, we could add a few more words if you think that would be helpful. I think that that's understood that, you know, nothing, you know, there's no perfect solution to everything. But, you know, if you think we need to make that more technical to make that clear, that would certainly be a reasonable change.
I would like to see the committee entertain that. I think, I don't know how to argue that really in a way that might be substantive, but to me, resolves is very hammered down, and I would like to see them make the effort and not force the responsibility of the parent onto the school, because it really, student absenteeism is the responsibility of the parent. And I think we're asking schools to make appropriate efforts, but not to solve the problem.
May I make a comment?
Yes, sir.
Would it be appropriate just to change resolves to addresses? I think that might be less words, but get at the same purpose.
Seeks to resolve, works to resolve. I don't know.
Yeah, seeks to resolve, works to resolve, addresses. I like those words better than something so finite. And to me, that word is just very powerful. 47.
Do you want to make that, oh, excuse me. Let's hear from our staff specialist, Aspen Florence, on this, and then be thinking, Member Bogus, if you want to make a motion.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, it looks like maybe we don't hear you.
Oh, am I?
There.
muted?
That's what we did. Oh,
Oh, we lost you again.
Are you speaking to me, Chair Norton?
I'm sorry. No, I am speaking to Aspen Flores. Okay, let's have you go in. Oh, she says no, thanks. Okay. Yes, go ahead, Member Bogus.
I would make a motion that we change the word resolves to attempts to resolve. And if the committee likes the word addresses, I would make. Yeah, but I would make a motion that we address that word. That's a great motion. I know it's very clear and very succinct. Chair, how about I move that we change the word resolves to addresses?
Okay, so the amendment before the board is that on line 47, we changed the word to resolve. The word resolves to the word addresses school absenteeism. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I would just offer that I think it's been discussed. I just would like to give our LEAs that freedom and use language that places the responsibility where the responsibility lies, and that's ultimately with the parent. And the school plays a role, but the school cannot put kids in cars and drive them there. And so I think that this allows that responsibility piece to be placed at the feet of those who are ultimately responsible.
Thank you. I see a hand from Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, I'll speak to the motion. I think addresses is much more realistic than resolves, and I think it's a good change.
Okay. Specialist Florence, are you able to speak to us? She's off. Okay. All right. Seeing no additional hands on this issue, board member, the motion before the board is to change the word resolves on line 47 to now state addresses. So the sentence we'll just leave it that, to address the school absenteeism. Board members, go ahead and please vote. Board member Straight, do you have a vote up? I can't see it. Can you see it?
I show it's a yes for board member Straight.
It's a yes. Okay, so that passes unanimously.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question on line 64. May I address that now?
You bet.
So I do believe this is addressed to Mr. Rasmussen too. It's changing review attendance data from annually to monthly. Is that required by the new code? I read the code lines, but I don't recall seeing that.
I would defer, Aspen Florence, staff recommended that change. Can she address that?
Yes, please. Thank you. She was having some technical problems.
I will say that my recollection of the discussion was that was a staff recommendation. I don't think it was mandated by code, but I don't remember specifically.
Okay.
Amy Steele Smith has her hand up. Perhaps she can.
Okay, let's recognize Amy. And will you state your title too, Amy?
Well, Amy Steele Smith, State Board of Education Specialist in Prevention. So that was not a change that was made this year in legislation. However, as we're trying to move forward with making sure that our policies and our interventions are what's needed at the time, that is a change that we've decided would be beneficial for our schools in improving attendance.
Board Member Vargas?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about this from the point of view of an administrator, and this is, I think mandating monthly can become very cumbersome, and annually may not be often enough, but perhaps we consider language that isn't quite so prescriptive, as often as is necessary, but no less than once a quarter, or something to that effect. I don't want to deny that this needs to be ongoing, but I also don't want to put another mandate on our legislative or our LEA administrators it'll become cumbersome. And then if one later down in here, we have committees that have to review and the gathering of another committee. I just think monthly is cumbersome and perhaps too prescriptive language. Other thoughts?
Chair Moss?
I had another question, Bill, I'll come back to, but I guess on this one, I am curious, what do we know about the practice house?
Please.
I was, and that language is fine too, but I was going to suggest just changing monthly to regularly, if that would meet the objective.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Just change the word monthly to regularly.
Well, it used to be. Okay.
Sorry.
Do we need to define regularly? I mean, once a year probably is not enough. But monthly is too prescriptive, I think.
Chair, I think Staff Aspen has her hand raised. Maybe she can speak to this.
Am I okay to speak to this, Chair?
Chair, you're muted. Kristen, we can't hear you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry for technical difficulties. We have a different computer now. So later on in the rule, it did indicate a month. And so we were trying to just correlate those two pieces. I did just receive survey data from about 20 schools out in the field that said they are looking at attendance data on a monthly basis in order to be proactive in finding and addressing students that are in need. I am comfortable with a quarterly recommendation in that space, knowing that schools can choose to look at that as frequently as possible. Some schools are looking at attendance data on a daily basis in order to better help identify early on students that are struggling to attend and be able to react to that. But I think the regularly, but no less than quarterly feels okay to me.
Hey, I'm trying to, let's go down to Board Member Straight. We haven't heard him weigh in on this yet.
Yes, I'd say the elementaries that I'm familiar with, and then I'll talk secondary. There's some element of review that occurs every single day. Now, if this is referring to reporting of any sort, that's a different matter. But as far as day-to-day, most schools have attendance secretaries at all levels, or a secretary that is given that responsibility. They monitor. If a student is on tier 2 intervention, they're monitored every single day. So As far as the actual, what happens at the school level, that's continually and ongoing. But if this is report to a report, I think quarterly is good enough. I'm just not sure I completely understand the context of what's being requested in this line.
Good point. Board Member Bogus?
Yes, ma'am.
No, I just saw that your hand was up.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking me a question. So my concern is that if I review the language above and below, I don't care, and I think it's actually wonderful that schools are reviewing data, but just above it talks about convening an attendance review team. And I'm reluctant to say that team needs to meet monthly per the state board's directive. I think, we've got schools doing good work, and I just think it's too prescriptive. I think regularly is too nebulous, and maybe review attendance data no less frequently than once a quarter. And actually, I would move that, and maybe we can articulate the language through the motion, but I would move that we change that language to review attendance data no less than once a quarter.
Okay, so the motion before the board is to amend line 64 to read, review attendance daily, no less than quarterly, and consider revisions.
I'm so sorry, Chair. Review
Yes.
attendance data no less than once a quarter.
Thank you. Review attendance data, no less than once a quarter.
And perhaps if I could just add the word formally before review, and the committee can weigh in on that, but maybe that adds some clarity. Mr. Rasmussen can help me with this. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, may I?
Yes, sir.
Does that language cause any problems where some schools have quarters as parts of their terms, and quarters to other people might be a period of 3 months? I'm just wondering if that's the best word to use, if that might cause confusion.
Chair, may I?
Yes, ma'am.
What if we added fiscal quarter? Or academic quarter? And I'm asking, not suggesting, I'm asking the question, what if? Does
I
that
think
language?
fiscal quarter would be clearer. I don't know that every LEA would have academic quarters, because I think some are on do that differently, but I think fiscal quarter would be clearer at least.
I would be comfortable with the language fiscal quarter.
I'm on a school that
I
it's
would
on
love to hear
trimesters, and so
Davis's response to that, just so that, fiscal quarter could be 3 times a year. Is that clear enough? Member Davis? Oh, and I apologize if I didn't do that correctly, Chair Norton.
oh, that's okay. I was going to call in her too. So we're great minds think alike. Go ahead, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Davis.
Well, I think, to Chair Norton's point, she said, she's on trimesters and some of our schools are on trimesters on fiscal.
Go ahead.
I was trying to turn things on and turn things off, and
I know.
couldn't quite get there. Yeah, I think Board Member Davis is right, and I know for a fact the schools I'm associated with that they review monthly. But if this is a formalized thing where you make a report, well, I think once a quarter, or even twice a year, or even is plenty. But as far as the day-to-day activities, I don't want that to get lost by our actions saying, well, and I don't think that'll occur, but I know schools where tier 2 students, that their parents receive a report every single day in regards to the progress of their students, their children. So anyway, I have no real problem with changing this to quarterly, unless it sends the wrong message to LEAs. I think they'll continue to do whatever.
Chair, may I add something?
Yes, ma'am.
You know, I'm looking at the language, and the review isn't necessarily to work with kids. The review is to consider revisions to the attendance policy and to encourage student
encourage.
attendance. So it's kind of convoluted because you should be often reviewing attendance and encouraging student attendance, but you should not be monthly reviewing data to change your policy. And that's just going to be communication whiplash to everyone involved. So I don't know if those can be divided up somehow, but I mean, certainly they should not be forced to review monthly to consider changing their attendance policies.
Well, and you know, I think in some of these situations, we feel, you know, even changing attendance policy could be, you know, going from, you know, just recognizing a student and up to calling him in and give him a high five. You know, I mean, I don't think we're talking major policy changes. I think attendance policies at school are pretty flexible anyway, from what I have seen. Board Member Bogus?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, my hand is still up. I did have a thought, though. I think this goes back to the language above. You know, Member Davis did articulate her point very well, but we're talking about an LEA level team that's we're now requiring to meet monthly instead of annually. And I would just go back to, I think, maybe the language no less than once a quarter. I think monthly for an LEA level team is prescriptive.
Yeah.
The rest of the language in those lines 64 and 65, I think would go to support that idea that, you know, what we're doing inside our institutions might be a side note, like an anecdotal thing, because we're talking about an LEA level review to consider policy changes. And I just think it's too prescriptive.
Aspen, if you would like to comment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, can I speak to both of those things, Chair?
Thank you.
If you look down at line 86, it is talking about looking at data monthly to be able to shift and engage with individual students and students on tier 2 and tier 3 possible intervention plans. I am comfortable with it shifting to a quarterly piece based on LEA being able to make shifts to their policy and procedure. And that's typically those two things go together. So policy is that outward facing document that's talking about the number of tardies or absences a student has, but the procedure would be shifted probably on a quarterly basis based on what's happening. So policy and procedure usually come together in that quarterly team shift based on the data. So I think in practice, the LEA team looking at data in order to review their current practice is really important, and being able to make noticeable shifts at least quarterly. Whereas on that monthly basis, being able to review data based on foundational pieces and student-based intervention is essential, and that's outlined clearly on that line 86. So I want to reiterate, I think I'm comfortable with the quarterly, and I do think LEA should make shifts to their policy and procedure on a quarterly basis if what's currently happening isn't clear or not working.
Thank you. Board Member Straight.
Yes, so if we specify LEAs, what is there currently a requirement?
Yes, it's annual.
Probably Aspen would be the best to answer that question.
Currently a requirement for a team, is that the question?
Yes, for an LEA team, which would be a district or
Yes, that's been in board rule. That was previously in board rule, and so that hasn't shifted to have an LEA team and then a team that also convenes on a monthly basis to talk about student data. So those have both existed in Rule prior to these shifts.
So that is a requirement already, and it's monthly. Have we heard any complaints from LEAs to make that change from monthly?
Can I speak to that, Chair?
Please, thank you.
In full transparency, I'm fairly new to the role. In December is when I started, and the only feedback I've received is wanting more structure for and help with how those teams are functioning, but no complaints around the amount of time or teaming that's occurring.
If I may, Chair,
Yes, sir.
we did share the rule with our superintendents, with the USSA in a meeting this week. We didn't have any concerns from them on this particular area.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if it ain't broke, let's not fix it. I mean, they're used to this pattern. They'll probably continue that pattern. As far as a requirement, yeah, I'd be willing to make it a year. But truth of the matter is now that I know the history of it, I don't see a reason to fix it. Or I don't think there's anything to fix.
Chair Moss? Chair Moss, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks. I support the shift to quarterly. I just had a question for our experts on 74 to 82. And so this is also a shift. This in this case, it's more flexibility. So rather than mandating the team composition, we're saying it may include. I like that. So I'm not necessarily arguing against it, but I'm just curious again, kind of what the practice is. Some of this looks like best practice to have administrators, those involved in academics and health and wellness, student support. But that doesn't mean we need to mandate it. So I think this is a step towards flexibility, but I'm just curious what we're hearing about practice there. And is this typically what most schools do anyway, where they get these folks on that review team? And if this motion passes, that would be meeting quarterly. So just curious maybe how that's going down out in the field currently.
Am I okay to speak to that, Chair?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, the intent was to provide more flexibility with what that teaming piece looks like. The research currently is shifting a bit as far as how that teaming plays a part in shifting attendance. The whole nation has seen a big increase in chronic non-attendance, and so they're looking to kind of re-up or recertify what that attendance research looks like. And I do want to clarify, I still believe the team that's outlined in these lines are meeting quarter or monthly, whereas the broader team that's looking or would only need to make adjustments or do a formal review of data on that quarterly basis. So this team, I believe, should have more structure based on who's currently working at each school-based system, but the team would still be meeting on a monthly basis with that formal review of data on a quarterly basis.
Okay. Mr. Rasmussen, do you want to just talk about that note you just posted in the chat?
Yeah, I was just clarifying, Board Member Davis had posted something in the chat about there being a previous annual requirement. And I was just emphasizing that there are two things we're talking about here. On line 86, you see that there has always been that language there that the review team met monthly to inform actions and tiered interventions, so to talk about individual student situations. But the proposed change, which was meant to kind of go along with that, previously on line 64, it had been annually to consider policy issues, but the proposal would be monthly, and it sounds like the motion may be to change that to quarterly or something else. But I just wanted to clarify that there was that previous requirement that these review teams be meeting monthly, as Aspen noted, to talk about individual student issues and review data.
Thank you. And I just wanted to comment. I can see, a great teamwork going on here, because if we have quarterly new data, but it could be looked at by that team monthly to see, you know, how it's progressing, if that was working. Are we seeing improvements? Are we seeing declines in the successive months? And then, you know, bring in the new data and see where it should go from there. Okay, it appears that we have had the discussion and answered the questions. So, Board Member Bogus, your motion was that we would where are we? Could I have that line back on the right there? To review that we amend draft 2 to read that we review attendance data quarterly. Board members, go ahead and please vote.
So we're saying
Oh, I was
quarterly
wrong.
or no less than quarterly?
No,
Less than quarterly. But are we on? Yeah.
what did
Ma'am,
you want?
I would like it to read no less than quarterly.
No less than quarterly is the way the maker of the motion stated that. So let me just say that one more time. To review attendance data no less than quarterly would be the change. Go ahead and please vote. And I'm a yes. Tammy, can you see the votes?
I do. I show board member Straight was opposed on that one.
Okay, so it passes 4-1 with Board Member Straight voting in opposition. Is that correct?
That's what I showed you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we need to approve the full draft
Maybe.
2. Do I have someone who'd like to make that motion?
Chair Norton,
Yes,
I'm so sorry. I would like for us to look at line 84 quickly.
yes.
I heard, and maybe this is to Mr. Rasmussen. Did I hear you say that this change was a request from our LEAs?
We did get some feedback from the superintendents that this term two-way perspective, they didn't understand what that meant. And so staff recommended this change to family and student perception data because that would be something more commonly understood in the field and addresses what they're trying to get at.
Could we do something and I'm asking, could it be more effective to do language like shall fact find or shall collect data regarding student attendance through a fact finding process with students and families? I think the word perception can lead to a lot of ambiguity and in feelings and sometimes feelings that doesn't weigh into this. I think fact finding may be more clear and yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts, sir?
Can we have Specialist Florence speak on that? This was her suggested language.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, actually, and the thought process around it. It is actually intended to be family and student perception in particular. There are 4 main deficits as far as why students don't attend, and 2 of those are very heavily based on the perception of attendance from the family and the student, their perception on if school is important, their perception on how regular they need to attend for school to be beneficial, their perception on the culture of the school, the safety of the school, and things along those lines, which provides significant barriers for a student to attend. 2 of the 4 barriers actually rely heavily on those perceptions. And so being able to better understand what deficits we're dealing with on kind of a grand scale in each school system is actually part of the emerging research on how we start addressing the mass need for chronic non-attendance. So I would push to have it continue to be perception, whereas that fact finding kind of being able on that PBIS model of being able to find the root cause or the function of a student's behavior would fit into that other data collection and better understanding of a student profile. But this really is very focused on family and student perception.
What are your thoughts about shall collect data regarding student attendance through family and student interviews?
Can you give me more clarity on how you would see an interview?
Well, maybe that's not the best word to choose, but it's just that collecting that information and making certain that we're operating in objective reality, because we don't want to. Perception is important. I'm not disagreeing with that, but we don't want to change policy based on perception. We need to change policy and review our policy based on realities. And there are many people whose perception is not grounded in reality.
Absolutely. And I agree with what you're saying. And this would be utilized as kind of a help of that triangulation of data. So the understanding of we have 50% of our students that aren't attending. This is what parents are telling us. This is what students are telling us. This is what the days they're not attending, the times they're not attending, the class periods. So being able to use a lot of that concrete data, but be supplemented with the perception data to give us a better understanding of how we need to shift our policy and practice to be able to not meet the needs as far as, well, they say that our school is not welcoming, so we're going to, make sure we have a carnival on Fridays, but really understand that this is our deficit. The perception is the barrier, and we need to work to shift that perception if that's what we're struggling with. If families don't think school is important, then we need to have a campaign that's indicating why school is important and be doing those home visits and things along those lines. So I agree. I don't see us like altering based on the perception. I think the perception is giving us information as far as what we are or not communicating well to families.
Okay, I understand that. What are your thoughts about language such as shall collect data regarding student attendance through two-way communication with students and families?
I'm a proponent of that two-way communication. That's why I had that in there in the beginning. So and that actually matches a lot of our family engagement work that we're doing. And so I'm not opposed to something along those lines if that feels more clear.
Then if you feel like that is articulating that, I would move that language that we amend line 84 to read shall collect data regarding student attendance through two-way communication with students and families. Thank you, Allison, for that interchange. I appreciate you.
The motion is to amend line 84 to read shall collect, you said data
Regarding student attendance through two-way communication with students and families.
And would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think the conversation maybe speaks to the motion, Chair, but I would just offer that I think if we're looking at data, we want it to be more fact-based, and while perception is important, and that perception does play a part in why kids come to school, why they stay, what gets them there. But perception data, it just is not objective. We need something that's objective to look at when we look at data. And so I think this fits both molds and allows the goal to be achieved without putting us in a place where we're viewing data that's nebulous and ambiguous, where we're not seeing the picture. That would be my thoughts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chair Moss?
Well, it's funny, we're in the same room, so I could ask Member Boggess across our computer screens here, but I'm just curious whether we lose something, because I understand the point that perception can be, not necessarily reliable, but I wonder if we're losing the element of kind of their feedback or input about what might be contributing to attendance, and whether perhaps not perception, but feedback or input. I mean, there is this element of saying, you know, what can you tell us about what about our school may be contributing? Because I support Member Bogus, it's the family's responsibility to get them there. We're looking for, you know, kind of understanding of what might be keeping them away. So I wonder if there's a better word that could capture that outreach and their input that's a little more grounded than perception. Maybe it's just input or feedback or something to that effect. So I don't know, maybe I'll throw that across the computer screen to Member Bogus or to everybody. I guess I'm just throwing that out there, whether that concept can be captured with a more concrete word than perception.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Davis.
I'm fine with either perception or feedback. I was also actually fine with the language that Member Bogus proposed. I think it did leave some room for kind of that two-way communication implies. But I think it's really important when we're studying all aspects of education that we look at both quantitative data and qualitative data. And you know, the two are going to be different kinds of data, but they do give us different information, to Chair Moss's point. So honestly, I'm fine with all three of these that have been proposed. I think we need to pick one and move on.
I'm concerned about the family and student perception in language came from the superintendents who, you know, are dealing with this very heavily, and I worry about, you know, dropping language that they have proposed.
Chair,
Yes.
to clarify, this new language did not come from the superintendents. The
Okay.
superintendents only told us they had concerns with the language two-way perspective. After we met with them, we talked about that, and staff thought that this might be a good alternative. So that family and student perception isn't anything that USSA proposed specifically.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Chair Moss.
Well, I guess maybe I'll just suggest a proposed amendment to the amendment of replacing. Actually, I'm not sure what the language is now, as Member Bogus had proposed it. I don't see.
The amendment was that it would read, shall collect data regarding student attendance through two-way communication with students and families.
So the only piece I see missing there is it collects data about attendance. It's not necessarily collecting input about reasons. And I guess maybe I would just, I don't know, body doesn't want this, but I'm sorry, could you put that language anywhere? I apologize. I'm trying to keep track of it, but is there any way to look at it? And I could just.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up a Google Doc real quick.
I'm just trying to throw in feedback somewhere, and you know, maybe it doesn't work, maybe it does, but I see the only thing that we're collecting now is data, and I think having some element of that emphasizes we're going to ask for their take on, you know, our school. We want feedback, if not perception, then some sort of feedback in addition to the hard attendance data to Member Davis's point, quantitative and qualitative.
Chair, can I speak to that a little bit?
Yes.
I'm actually a big fan of that two-way data, mainly because it allows for an umbrella to open of perception data, which would fit into that two-way communication data, as well as like our home visit data and what families are telling us in that space. It kind of broadens the umbrella of what a school can utilize to be able to meet that need. And we do have a significant amount of training and support coming out this year to be able to support the rule and the legislation, which would be able to kind of promote that perception data alongside some of those other pieces, Chair. So
Okay.
if that
Thank
gives
you.
clarity at all. Yep.
Thank you. Board Member Bogus, you haven't. Oh, sorry. Back to you, Chair Moss.
Well, just follow up, Florence, is it your take that we don't need anything like perception or feedback or input then, that the language as framed there would include that kind of element? We don't need to add something to replace perception?
As long as we have that two-way communication piece, so I'm comfortable with either two-way communication, which indicates that we're listening and responding, or the perception. So either or feel okay to me, as long as it gives me the capacity to be able to provide the right type of support and training with either of those language shifts in there.
Okay, thanks. That helps.
Okay, Board Member Bogus, you have a question or comment, and then also will you look over that amendment that's on the screen and see if that's the way you presented it?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, Chair Moss kind of stated what I was going to state, that I think the ability to have those qualitative conversations is inherent within that language. And I'm looking, sorry, it's pretty small on my screen. Yes, that is correct. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so if there's no other questions or comments, board members, would you please vote? Okay,
And I show that's unanimous.
okay, that passes unanimously then. Thank you. All right, are there any more comments on this, or are we ready to go with the motion?
I would move that we put draft 2 as amended before the board. What is the recommendation here?
Okay, the motion is that the committee approves R277-607 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
As amended.
As amended, that the committee approves R277-607 draft 2 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Go
Yes,
ahead.
ma'am, that would be my motion. I would move that as amended.
Thank you. Go ahead and please vote. All right, looks like that was unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and by way of housekeeping, we're a little bit past the 1 hour mark, the 1/3 mark, and we are not quite to the 1/3 part of our agenda. So we've got some big items coming up, so we're going to get right into it. Item 2.4 is also an action item. This is the state fiscal year 2024 public education budget review and recommendation for approval. It looks like we have Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, assisted by Assistant Superintendent Deborah Jacobson.
Madam Chair, this is Scott, or Deputy Superintendent Jones. Can I go?
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks, ma'am. So Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones of Operations, which includes the financial operations of the Utah State Board of Education. What I'd just like to give you a staff perspective and a little bit more background on why this is an important process. And what this process is the basically the board's review and then setting of the budget for the next fiscal year. So in this case, for fiscal year 24. I've been in this position for 8 years, and we've taken kind of different processes and approach to this. So let me be more specific about that. When I first started here, item number 4, as you see it right now, was really just the only item. And then we would load all of the budget into the one action item and request that the finance committee make a recommendation to the full board to adopt whatever, that bulk or that overall just one agenda item type process. As we progress together, and obviously there's different board members that come in on different finance committees, 2 things became very apparent within the last 4 or 5 years, right? Is that board members wanted to not just see an aggregate, just one agenda item. They wanted 2 things broken out. They wanted the legislative estimates, which really gives a better picture, or carved out of the overall budget proposal or process on how much LEAs will receive, flow through. So items 4 and 4.1 and even 5 are all really part of just what we're seeking is an aggregate approach from the finance committee, but then also trying to provide by way of, and I use the term carve out by, you know, adding additional items below the one big item, so that in a general sense, the finance committee can review those 3 areas, right? The overall budget itself, and then the 2 carve outs that are integral parts of the overall budget. So I know, and Madam Chair, if I may, I might just skip a little ahead to item number 5.
Yes, please.
We went back and forth on this, on whether that should be an action item or an information item. We are not asking the finance committee to make a recommendation on the one eaches, if you will, of all the positions. What we're asking for is just as part of item number 4 and 4.1 is an overall recommendation for the budget with consideration of these 2 specific carve outs, the legislative estimates and the compensation. There's still work to be done by staff on the one eaches, but because of the timing and because of the law, the Budgetary Procedures Act, and the fact that you meet once a month, we're trying to make sure that we get to the point where, and not being presumptive, that the board is directing the budget for FY24 with staff having to follow up on the one eaches. That's another definition of mine, like each one of the positions for the compensation and the market adjustments. What we were also trying to do is, if you recall yesterday, the board took the recommendation of last month's finance committee to follow the same process for the Budgetary Procedures Act. Or the Budgetary Procedures Act for the next legislative session, you know, which starts in finance committee. So what we were also trying to do in 5 was to show that, because there was some wording in there, and Vice Chair Davis was the one that articulated with some emphasis on market adjustments, right? So Chair, at your direction or your prerogative, 5 could actually just become an information item. Again, we put that in the backups just to show that we were moving towards the next fiscal year, and that we had received an 8.75% increase that every employee will get, you know, subject to you setting the budget, of course, right? Everybody will get 8.75%, but then there was additional money given to us as part of the compensation piece of 2.3 million. And we were just showing that we're working towards that. We're working towards July 1st. And I don't want, but I think it's important that with these next 2 items, that we're just seeking an aggregate review and approval of the finance or an aggregate review of the finance committee to make a recommendation that the full board approve the state fiscal year 24 budget in the aggregate, which would include the compensation component. So hopefully that makes sense. If there's a different procedure or process we need to take, if this is too confusing, I understand. But staff were really genuinely interested in trying to meet different board members' concerns or intent of having these broken out, you know, beyond just one lump agenda item. That there was a lot of interest in legislative estimates and providing the opportunity for you to have that carved out, so to speak. So it's just not all mixed up in one bundle. So I'll just stop there, because it's probably a good thing that I took off to Arizona, so Deborah can't, hunt me down. So anyway, hopefully this helps. But again, we're open to procedures. But again, when we get to item number 5, we're not trying to get a recommendation to approve that sheet and those things. There's still, we have between now and the 1st of July, we're just asking you to recognize how great the legislature was to us, and well, to state employees as a whole. And that, that 5%, the 3.75% made a big difference, or will make a big difference towards, the market adjustments. But there's still room for us to request more money as part of the process that the board approved yesterday. So I'll stop right there for any questions or concerns and go back to item number 4, ma'am.
Okay. And I almost look at it as item 5 could be 4.2.
Yeah.
You know, we've
Yeah.
got one carve out for those very important legislative estimates that we all are looking at all year long. And then in particular this year, item 5 is something that is of top concern again for us, and that was those market rate adjustments. And that we can see that, yes, we have some relief in that area thanks to our wonderful state legislature, and those will be dispersed as best is considered by management as equitable. I see some hands up. Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, thank you. Since we're kind of bleeding in 4 and 5, I'll just make a quick comment about 5. And that is that I think we do need to recognize and thank the legislature for some movement there. And I think we also need to kind of use a scalpel, not an axe, and really dig into what our needs still are. I didn't go with the top disparity, but just the second down with our economist. And I calculated out
Oh, Cindy, we kind of lost you
all
there.
of the hourly pay, and it still leaves us. Sorry, I think my service is going in and out. I just said I did the calculations on the economist, and it still leaves us about 10,000 annually under market. So we need to be careful there. But my question is, 5 and 15 both say special ed admin.
Cindy, we've lost you.
Lost her, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
There, got you there. Give us your question.
Why do lines 5 and 15 both say special education administration?
Madam Chair, what is she looking at? Is she in item number 4 or 5?
Where, yeah, I don't know that either.
4, item 4.
So on the overall budget
Yes,
or the estimate?
on the overall budget, item 4.
Member Davis, could you say the page again, please?
I think she said line 5 and 15.
It's under the special education section,
Oh.
and it's line 5 and 15. Why do they both say special education administration? Are there two different budgets there?
Yeah, actually,
Leah Voorhees is on. Should we ask her? I think let's try bringing, while you're pulling that up.
You know where
This
this
is-
is at? I'm still trying to find it too.
Assistant Superintendent Voorhees, can you
right
weigh
there.
in on that topic, the special
Yeah.
education budget?
Yes, I can, Chair. Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support. So that is the right page. So if you look in the program number, Board Member Davis, and on line 5, the program is SEA, and on line 15, the program is SPED. They're two different funding programs, and there is administration. There's an allowable amount for administration in each of those programs. So it's separated by program, as opposed to all the SPED admin, that we have available put together. Does that help?
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Great. Chair Davis, sorry, Chair Moss.
Hey, thanks. I don't want to go too broad here, but Scott, maybe just a quick note on the opportunity for Finance Committee members to think strategically about our budget. We review, and we've got a wonderful depth of detail here. We talked a little bit about, taking a look at different sections each month in finance.
Right.
As we're seeking as board members to kind of do our duty to help drive improvement, I heard somebody in education or a legislative session once say, people talk about the budget and then they talk policy. The most important policy bill is the budget. That is what reflects priorities and where you look at outcomes, right? So part of what we do is we go up there and advocate, and we've done that this last session. What's the opportunity for board members to think about these kind of questions, and what's the framework for that? If we're trying to see about, as we do a strategic plan and then look at how we're spending money, and a lot of that comes, of course, in specific line items from the legislature, but what's the opportunity? If you could just maybe take a couple minutes. Truly, that's a large subject, and I apologize, Chair, if that's out of line, I'll withhold the question, but maybe just setting the table as we go into this. W. Jones, what is the opportunity for that kind of engagement from board members?
Yeah, Madam Chair, may I respond?
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's a great opportunity. Can you go back to that special education slide, please, whoever's driving? So just as note, Madam Chair, for the benefit of the committee members, the first and foremost two backups in the agenda are the Budgetary Procedures Act and the Money Management Act. So to Chair Moss's question, there's a great opportunity here. But first and foremost, we have to meet the law, right? And that's setting and, seeing if the board will approve an aggregate budget, so to speak, right? Even though we provide you by program detail in here, what we're really seeking is that by the May meeting, because we have to load the budgets before the year starts of the timing, that you approve an aggregate budget. If the board does that, then as we start the next fiscal year, you as the board can identify specific programs. And this is why we did it this way, so that you can see within special education what programs as part of the aggregate budget setting process are inclusive of the overall budget. Then you as finance committee members can tell us as staff which programs you want to see in subsequent finance committee meetings to help you make decisions on, hey, are we getting ROI? Should we ask for more money? Should we ask maybe that funding get reprogrammed? Different things like that. So that's my answer to Chair Moss's question. Did I answer his question, please, ma'am?
Sir, did you?
Yes, thank you. And very concise, but also framed the opportunity well. So thank you.
Thank you.
And could I just maybe, because it would help me a little bit, are we talking that because we have the special education budget up here, if I am concerned about the lack of special education teachers, and I see on here that we have this paraprofessional to teacher scholarship, and I say, oh my, look, we have appropriated $24,000 into that area. Maybe if we put more, we might get some more special. Is that the kind of thing that we're talking where board member input could be of help?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. From
Okay.
my perspective, that would help greatly. But first and foremost, we have to meet the law and set a high level budget. Then as we progress together, because you can always amend the budget, right? You can always amend it. If you well, and we obviously have to follow. I don't want Deborah to come through the screen on me now, because I got to make sure that there's restricted money. There's some things the board can move between line items. Sometimes we have to wait till the next legislative session, though, to move things, but that would help us immensely. And then it really focuses on the fact that the board is driving the budget, right? You're driving that, and then by drilling down, so to speak, more on programs as we move together, we can start that as early as next month, right? But we, at the same time, or parallel to that, we have to meet the law, because Deborah has strict deadlines where she has to load a budget in well in advance of the July 1st start date, right? And this is why we have to put it seems like it's really fast and furious, right? But because you meet once a month, and finance committee has to make a recommendation to the full board. This is exactly why we're on such a tight timeline and thing. But at the same time, we don't want to rush you or feel like you're doing that. But yeah, that's a great example, and along the lines of Chair Moss. You help us set the aggregate budget, and then we can definitely
Move from there.
Yeah, at the value of that. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is our goal right now, is to move this aggregate budget. Board Member Bogus.
I just have a quick question. So, should, like, for example, Chair Norton, you said, you know, I want to X and X, and we go in and speak with Superintendent Jones and Johansson, I believe, and we make those changes. Would that come as an amended budget to the board? I want some clarity on what that would look like and how that would happen.
Not at this point. Right now, well, I'll turn that back to Superintendent Jones.
Yeah, Madam Chair, to answer Board Member Bogus's question through you, that would, so that by the definition of that, whatever the Finance Committee and then ultimately the board deems, once you set the next year's budget, again, we could start as early as next month for you to, if you tell us what specific programs you want, to Chair Moss's point, to start to look at, you know, from what may be an ROI perspective. And then if, you know, you want to make adjustments to that, you would propose those as part of a process of budget amendment that the board would have to approve as well. So if you wanted to move money between programs, or, you know, and we can, you know, because that's what staff are here for, to make sure that we, you know, we follow the laws and we follow the legislative intent and et cetera, then yes, it would become, the short answer is yes, it would become a budget amendment process. First and foremost, though, we need, you know, to meet the overall intent of the Budgetary Procedures Act, which is for you to set a budget, so to speak, in the aggregate. And then as we move together through the next fiscal year, if you as the board deem it necessary to, you know, make adjustments, then we would do it in an amendment sense. So did I answer Board Member Bogus's question, Madam Chair?
Board Member Bogus, did that answer your question?
Just have one small follow-up, because I want to make certain that I'm clear. So this could happen in the next month, or a budget amendment could happen in like November, let's say. Am I understanding you correctly, Mr. Jones?
Madam Chair, yes,
Yes.
you're understanding me correctly. That's
Yes.
my response.
Okay, thank you, sir. I do appreciate you.
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Moss.
Quick comment and a motion. I just say the comment, I think this takes up on what Deputy Jones said. Some of these decisions could be made internally within our agencies.
Yes.
Others would require legislative approval, but that's also within the realm of, you know, our opportunity, I guess. If one, you know, if the board felt that way, you could go up and say, you know, part of our legislative process might be a recommendation to make some adjustments internally and loosen strings or reallocate whatever. So that's a, you know, it's a thoroughly vetted process, but yeah, I did want to make clear that opportunity as I understand it. So my motion, though, is that the Finance Committee, I move that the Finance Committee recommends the Utah State Board of Education approve the 2024 state fiscal year budget.
Thank you. The motion on the floor is that the Finance Committee recommends that the Utah State Board of Education approve the 2024 state fiscal year budget.
Chair, may I amend Chair Moss's amendment?
Let Chair Moss speak to the motion first.
Okay.
Well, I think this is something we need in terms of timing and legal compliance. So appreciate all the depth of thought that goes into this. It looks to be sound and well researched, and I think we need to approve it. And then, you know, we can start our own process of digging down and looking and analyzing. So I think this gets the job done, but open to hear from Member Bogus.
Go ahead, Member Bogus.
Oh, well, I'm not here for banter or semantics. I like the word receives better. I would like to move to amend his motion that we receive the budget. I think the word approve, may I speak to the motion?
Well, just state your motion and then I'll have you speak to the motion.
Well, I would move that we change the word accept to receive.
Approve?
Okay,
Approve.
accept's not there.
Approve to receive. Sorry, I don't see anything on my screen.
Okay, so
black to me.
So let's see if I can state it right. So board Member Bogus's amendment to the motion is that the Finance Committee recommends that the Utah State Board of Education receives the 2024 state fiscal year budget.
Yes,
Now,
ma'am.
speak to your motion.
I think it just goes to accountability. Something of this magnitude, I would have a hard time, and I like Superintendent Jones. I want to really just reassert that and stuff, but approving something of this magnitude to me says that I have done the due diligence of going into every line item and all of those things, and I could not in clear conscience recommend that I approve something that I have not done that due diligence on. And so if we can move this with the word receive, that would be what I would ask of the whole board.
Chair Moss.
I saw other hands, so I could wait. I see Chair
Okay.
Member Davis and
Yes.
Vice Chair Davis, Member State.
Vice Chair Davis, I know these titles, I'm tripping. I think I'll just call you all chairs.
Perfect.
Vice Chair Davis?
Thank you. I just am wondering if we change to receive, will it give our staff the same the same weight that it needs for the timelines to be accomplished? And will it also keep the board members in the driver's seat, or will it put the staff in the driver's seat? And the reason I ask this is because I believe we spent some extensive time talking about the differences between approve and receive for our advisory groups. So for example, when we have an advisory report come to the full board, then we receive that report. That means it's owned by the advisory board. It's submitted by them. We receive it. We don't necessarily agree with it. Will receive harm what we're trying to do in keeping ownership with the board? And will it still allow us to move forward in the way that this whole process is meant to do?
Deputy Superintendent Jones, do you want to
Sure.
address that?
Right, so, and Madam Chair, using the word receives implies to me that basically the board next month would receive what staff have put together as the Board of Education's budget, or the public education budget, if you will, for state fiscal year 24. My concern with that, and I do also understand Board Member Bogus's concern on the word approve, right, is that under the Budgetary Procedures Act, and I'm not an attorney, but these questions have come up in the past from prior board members on wanting to ensure that the board had the authority or the say in, what the budget is set at, in those programs that, staff have put together, and that it aligns with legislative intent, and we've done that. I think we'd probably need a legal interpretation on whether or not receives is adequate enough to meet the law as applied by the Budgetary Procedures Act and or the Money Management Act. My concern with receives is that it's not on the record that the board approves that. I totally understand Board Member Bogus's thing because of how complex this budget is. Approving a budget like this does imply that the board has indeed gone through and do it, but I know time and all those types of things take that into account. So I'm just a little bit worried about that receives doesn't quite meet the law, right? That you as the body have set a budget, because local districts and charter schools rely on us to send all this information out to them so that they can meet the law, to get their boards, to get it in front of their boards and meet all of the different timelines and dates in there. So whether you approve or receive it, we're going to still push on the timelines, our knowledge of meeting the laws and the applicable codes to it. But again, we just want to make sure that this budget is at the board's direction. Does that help clarify?
Yes, thank you very much. Does that help you? Board Member Davis, Vice Chair Davis?
Yeah, but I just don't know if we got a clear answer between receives, which implies no approval, and approve, which applies total. What I think of approval, I'm thinking of a very temporary approval. I did go through line by line, but my goodness, we could certainly dig into this more. I'm thinking it's kind of a preliminary approval. Maybe we change the words to preliminarily approves, or we change the words to advances. The Finance Committee advances the budget
Well,
to the
I
board
think
for more.
I don't want to speak for Deputy Superintendent Jones, but I think he said that, you know, the Budgetary Act says that we need to approve so that they can, you know, approve the aggregate amount here. Let's go to
Sorry.
Board Member Straight.
Yes, my experience in municipal government, we always use the word approve, even if it's preliminary budget. And we actually have deadlines. I don't know if, I guess it's across the board in all government agencies, those requirements and guidelines. So I don't feel comfortable using the word receive. Whether we use approve, amendments can always be made, changes can always be made in the budget. When we do truth and taxation for property tax purposes in municipal level, we are required by law to meet a certain deadline, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're raising the mill levy that year. It just means that it's going to be figured out.
Thank you, Chair Moss.
Well, my question was similar. I mean, to the extent that these are legislative funds, do we have a legal requirement to approve the budget before we get the funds? Do we have a requirement to approve before we can distribute? I mean, and the Budgetary Act that were attached in the backup are truly long. So I have to admit, I read through the budget in some detail, but I didn't read the whole thing. So I texted Brian Quisenberry. I just want to make sure that we're doing what we need to do in finance and then in the full board approval to actually be spending this money. So if that's approved, then my sense is that's what we need to do. If there's an opportunity to revise before full budget or before full board meeting, we could certainly do that. But I don't want to get behind on whatever formal stamp is required from this body to actually have that money flow to where it needs to go. And I think Deputy Jones has answered to the extent that he's aware. Maybe we do need Brian to weigh in.
Madam Chair. Scott?
Yes.
I mean, could we pull up the Budgetary Procedures Act and I can show you just real quick the salient, pieces of it. So
Thank you.
If you could make it bigger, please. Yes. So, okay. So, if you'll scroll down to,
I'm sorry, point of order, maybe this is not whatever, the screen is black on my end.
Oh.
The shared screen is, I can see like it's like grayed out.
Chair Moss, yeah, step in and help. Thanks.
We got it.
all right, scroll down. Please, a little further. Actually, I think it's way down. It's under paragraph 2. Let's see, disposition. Yeah, so this talks about, part 2, I'm sorry. So here's the budget process, appropriations and expenditures. So this is what dictates that the board has to, turn in a budget proposal to the governor. Then if you scroll down a little bit further, let's see, yeah, keep going, sorry. Right, so then as you see, we have requirements to, submit financial statements and all that. What I'll do, ma'am, is I'll get with AG Quisenberry and, show why we need an approval, so to speak, by the board. But to Board Member Straight's point, And I think that Board Member Bogus put it into, you can do a preliminary approval and then subject the budget to future amendments if you want. We just have to have a baseline, a baseline approval so we can load it into the applicable system. So I think it's a value add if you call on Deborah Jacobson so she can describe the requirements that she has to meet that are imposed on us by the GOPB and by way of the Budgetary Procedures Act. Will you recognize her real quick?
You bet. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Jacobson.
Sure. So, I mean, about the middle of May, we're required to load our budget into the accounting system for the state. And in order for us to even start our procurement processes, things for the next year, the budget has to be loaded first. So, I mean, that's our biggest deadline right now, as far as getting the budget approved.
Okay,
Hopefully that.
thank you. Board Member Bogus.
Yes, ma'am. What, maybe I'm moving language, I don't know, but what is the committee's thought on the recommended action with a comma subject to possible amendments or changes?
So you're amending your own motion? Well, we haven't passed it yet. Never mind.
I
So
would
you're-
say I would withdraw the motion and based upon the feedback from Superintendent Jones and Jacobson, that we recommend that the Utah State Board of Education approves the 2024 state fiscal year budget subject to possible changes or amendments.
Madam Chair, I think that's a really well worded motion and it provides the board flexibility to make amendments in the future, but then provides staff the ability to meet the deadlines with a preliminary budget to load into the systems prior to July 1st.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis.
Agree.
Board Member Straight.
My understanding is that we don't have to state the power to amend. If I'm incorrect, then I definitely want that language there. But if we do not include that language, does that mean we don't have that authority? I'd like that question addressed.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
ahead.
in the time that I've been here, I haven't seen where there is a requirement for that, right? Like specific that, to Board Member Straight's question, it's always been implied that you don't have to have that language, but I don't think there's anything that says you can't say that, right? But I haven't seen anything that says you absolutely have to do have language that says a preliminary budget or subject to amendment. It's always been that way that you as the body can amend your budget, right? In accordance with the applicable laws and program specifications, of course. But, and that's what we're here to do, is to make sure or advise you on, what limits there are, or what, you have that, but we have that capability. I think he's right. Board Member Straight's right, that there isn't anything that specifically says you can do that, but there's not anything that specifically says you can't. What Board Member Bogus's motion does, it just makes it clear that you as the board can, continually look at your budget, review it, update it, and amend it as part of the monthly budget report, right? I mean, if a board member sees a particular program, something that they have questions on and that they would like to amend or change the budget, you have that ability to do that. I do feel strongly you would have the ability to do that without what the language is, but there's nothing that prevents you from accepting Board Member Bogus's motion to have that language in there either. So that's my response. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I don't want to strain at gnats, but I think in the future, if we put this language in now we say we have to put it in next year and year after that. We have to do that because if you don't, then, well, look, you specified here, I think there is greater danger. I don't actually think there's danger either way, which is why I think it may be straining on that's on my part. But just for the sake of precedent, I'm not going to vote for that change.
Board Member Moss. Sorry, Chair Moss.
No worries. I'll just speak in support. I think it clarifies kind of the reality here of how it works. It'll authorize our staff to go forward, but also highlights the committee's opportunity to, as we move forward, dig deeper. If we see anything that was not the understanding originally, or that there are reasons to, consider adjusting it, it frames it, I think, in a way that accurately describes the process. So I appreciate the amendment. I support it.
Okay, Board Member Davis? I see a hand up.
So sorry, I'll take it down. I'm good to
Okay.
go.
Board Member Bogus?
I apologize as well, Chair Norton.
Okay.
Chair Moss said everything I intended to say and I forgot to take my hand down.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the Finance Committee recommends that the Utah State Board of Education approve the 2024 state budget. Oh, the whole thing's not here. And whoever's driving, help me, Cami. There we go. The Finance Committee recommends that the Utah State Board of Education approve the 2024 state fiscal year budget subject to amendments. Board members, go ahead and please vote. And I am in opposition. So it looks like that passes 3-2. Okay, now I might need some help from those like Chair Moss or Deputy Superintendent Jones with items 2.
I'm so sorry, Chair Norton, but I do believe we voted on an amendment to the language. And now we have to vote on the language itself, just for a point of process clarity. If I'm wrong, I apologize.
Thank you. Well, that's okay, because I'm kind of rolling into this. My question with this is for Chair Moss and Scott Jones. Item 2.4.1 was listed as an action item, and item 2.5 as well, when in fact they are part of this budget that we are possibly going to preliminarily approve subject to amendments. And I would like to say, and I mean, I'm wondering, because it is in those two items are included in that, do we need to have a separate motion for that? That I did not think we did, because we have this already in here, but I would like you two to weigh in on that.
I would defer to Deputy Jones. I guess to the earlier question, given that we're in committee, I think the subject to amendments part was accepted as a friendly to my initial motion, and then we voted on that. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong there, but I don't know that we need the formality of approving the amendment and then voting again on the underlying motion, given the way that came together. The other one, I guess, would probably go to Deputy Jones for whether item number 5 was subsumed within the vote on number 4, or whether we need to take the same. Tell me if I'm wrong on either one of those, Scott.
Yeah. So this goes to what I was trying to articulate earlier. By way of a process, board members have asked that we break these things out, the legislative estimates and then the compensation pieces. They've asked for those to be distinguishable, so to speak, right? So I'm not sure that, I'll own this. I wasn't sure if I had to, keep consistency for those to be action items, because you were doing it as part of the overall aggregate budget approval. I just think that's probably a misunderstanding on my part, because I can attest and guarantee that these components, the legislative estimates that you see in there in the backups, and the overall compensation, not, again, trying to explain, you're not approving that sheet, so to speak, and all the different positions. Management does that you've basically approved the budget with subject to amendments that allows us to, start to distribute the funds on July 1st and do those types of things. So, can we go back to I really think this is important. So, Madam Chair, can we go back to the Budgetary Procedures Act?
Would you please? Thank you.
So just real quick, and thank you so much for help from my staff. If you'll go to 63J-1-292, paragraph A. The wording there, let's see, are we there yet? If you can find it.
Sorry, sir, what was the
Sorry,
63J-1- what?
hang on. 63J-1-2092, paragraph A.
You have a page number by chance?
We're at 217 now.
Yeah, you got to go way down.
It's actually 209.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
So,
on page
209. Sorry, 209. There was a typo. Sorry, no, that's okay, Dan.
There we go. And then 2 and what?
A. See, this is what we mean by, so state finance, when they say the director, that's state finance, right? That's the state finance director, shall require the head of each department, which really the head of our department, Department 400, is Sid, okay? But in order to do this, though, we've always asked for, so they call it a budget execution plan. And in the future, we can make it more specific to that in the action item, that you're approving what's called a budget execution plan. That you're providing an amount, or you're providing for us as staff to move forward for the thing. Can Sid just do it, or to take names out of it? Can the superintendent just do it on their own? Yeah, probably by someone else's interpretation of language, but we really feel strongly that the board should be the ones to be a part of this process. So, and it says the finance, and then in B, it says the director may require any departments because in the financial system, the Board of Education, the Utah State Board of Education is Department 400. So it says the director may require any department to submit a budget action plan for any other period, so during the year, they can come to us and do that, but we would run it through you as well. So, and then see, as you can see in 3 and 4, it cascades on down there. So this has always been, even before, at the time I was coming on, the insistence was board members insisted that this process be followed in accordance with the Budgetary Procedures Act. In the future, we can use the terminology execution plans. Does that help?
That does help a lot. Thank you. Member Straight.
Yes, I thought we were only voting on the amendment.
Okay.
If I thought
right.
if I thought it was combined and it was amended, right? So I don't want to put us in violation by voting no on a preliminary budget, because those things, even if I have, for example, a different opinion on a line item, and I wanted to make a change to that, I would vote for the preliminary budget, because that's a requirement. And so, and if that's the case, if we're treating this as the same and the superfluous language that was added, then I want to change my vote to yes, because I don't want to put myself at odds with the process.
And Board Member Straight, I'm in the very same position as you were. I was moving off of that to see if I needed to make an amendment to the motion again, which apparently I do not, because it was included in that motion. But I was feeling the same way you do, that then we would have the full motion to go ahead and approve with amendments. But let's listen into Chair Moss and his thoughts or comment or question.
I was just going to say, I think I misspoke and your points are well taken. I think procedurally that probably is kind of the committee flow as you take the amendments and you vote on it, but that's a really good point. So I think, yeah, it probably stands that the amendments were adopted by 3-2, but now we still need to vote on the underlying motion, right?
Okay.
I hadn't thought that part through, and I was just sort of thinking through process, but
Okay.
substantively, yeah.
Okay. So we need a motion then.
I think we just vote on the underlying motion.
So I'll make the motion that the Finance Committee recommends that the Utah State Board of Education approve the 2024 state fiscal year budget subject to amendments.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay, board members, go ahead and please vote. Cami, it looks like that was unanimous.
Yes, that's what I got too.
Okay, great. All right. So next on our list, then we'll jump down to item 2.6 because we've already addressed 2.4.1 and 2.5. Item 2.6 is an action item. R277-489 kindergarten programs and assessment. These are amendments. And we will be hearing from Deputy Superintendent Stallings.
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. In just one moment, I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully that looks good to you, Chair. Does that show up?
I see it great. How about, yeah, I think we're fine.
Great. So R277-489 is being amended due to the passage of HB 477, which, as you may remember, eliminates the two separate line item programs and instead rolled all of the funding up into the WPU. And so because of that, LEAs will no longer need to apply separately in order to qualify for the grant program, but instead, as you'd see at the very end of this rule, they will be submitting their membership right here in section 5. They'll be submitting their membership daily, just as they do for grades 1 through 12. And those counts will be looked at on October 1st and June 15th. What it doesn't state here in the rule, but is in the code, is that if a student is participating in full day kindergarten or kindergarten program that's equivalent in length to grades 1 through 3, the LEA will count that student for 1 WPU or 0.9 if it's a charter school. And then for students who are not attending full day, they will receive 0.55 of the WPU. So, and I'll hurry and try and get through the majority of the amendments, eliminate the application requirements and some of the criteria we use for distribution of funding and determining who qualified, because now all LEAs will have the same access to the WPU funding. It does make clarifications on the KEEP assessment that has continued and is still required in code and now in board rule. And then again, clarifies the reporting related to the program. So happy to answer any questions. I am Not sure who from our early learning team, if Christine Elegante is here or Sarah Wibke, but it looks like Sarah's here. So we're happy to answer questions as the chair would like us to answer them.
All right. Board members, are there any questions or comments on this most lovely? Thank heavens we're having full day kindergarten options now. Go ahead, Vice Chair Davis.
I move that the committee approves R277489 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading, and I'll speak to the motion.
Thank you. So the motion on the floor is that the committee approves R277-489 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Go ahead and speak to your motion.
All of these changes are to align directly with code changes this past legislative session. So I think we need to move it forward, and I'm ready to vote.
Thank you. Board Member Bogus.
Yes, Chair, I just wanted to ask Superintendent Stallings, the KEEP assessment, as it's listed in here, is this the place for, and if so, should we put the opt-out language in here for the KEEP assessment?
Go ahead.
I believe the KEEP.
It's in line, sorry, I apologize. It's in lines 46 through 51.
So generally, KEEP is currently an opt-out due to a general section of code that gives families or parents the right to opt their students out of state-provided assessments or tools. And if you'd like, I could go look at that in the code, but it's not necessary to put in the board rules, since the code already allows for that and provides that opt-out opportunity.
Okay, that's all I wanted to be clear on. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, Chair Moss.
Quick question, I guess probably for Angie. So this came up in the Reports and Requirements Task Force. We had a lot of discussion about overlapping KEEP and Acadience. And there was, some input from the members of the field in that committee. What's the effect of doing this on the alternative assessment, whether it's Acadience or I guess it is Acadience? And does this affect choices, restrict options, kind of clarify a mandate? And was there additional input on that question outside of what we heard in the task force?
Yeah, that is something that we talked about actually when we were preparing this rule, and whether it was time, whether we're ready as staff and the board to make that transition potentially from KEEP to Acadience. This rule, the way it's written right now, would designate that the assessment is KEEP. And one thing that did happen during the session is HB 477 did eliminate the reference explicitly to KEEP from code. We did ask for that in HB 477 to give the board the authority to at some point designate whether you want KEEP or you want to use Acadience. We didn't, and this is, again, this was a discussion we have. We weren't sure if we were ready to have that discussion today about making that decision, because there's a lot of stakeholders who have opinions on that and may not have had the opportunity to do it by this April meeting. But the good news is we do have a plan where Sarah and team are going to be meeting with various stakeholder groups, and we're going to bring that issue up in August finance at the same time we bring 419. You may think, why in the heck would you bring kindergarten back with 419? But the interesting thing is if we move from KEEP to Acadience, it actually would potentially impact provisions in R277419. And this is why. The KEEP takes a lot more time to administer than Acadience. And that is why in R277419, you as a board have allowed up to 12 days of instructional days to be used for kindergarten to assess the KEEP. If you move to Acadience, the board will also want to consider reducing that 12 days, either eliminating or reducing it significantly. And so there are some other related questions that come up if we move from KEEP to Acadians. And the staff felt like because calendaring is part of that equation, and we've already set the school calendar expectations, that it may be best to wait for the 24-25 school year and do the assessment changes and all of that at once instead of doing it so close. It doesn't seem like it's very close to the beginning of the school year, but if you consider that teachers and administrators are out all of summer, if the board approves this in May, they'd have to be ready to go and train on this new assessment in August, and that their teachers would be out for all of the summer. So it takes more time to make that switch than we felt like was time. So Sarah and team were planning to meet with curriculum directors and others, because the feedback that they've received so far is split. It's not, yes, we definitely want to do Acadians, or, yes, we want to keep. And so in order to get the LEA stakeholders, give them an opportunity to share that feedback with either we could go to the reports and requirements task force again, but we were recommending it just come to the finance committee in August with 419 and do those together.
Follow up, Chair?
Yes, sir.
So would it make sense to hold on lines 47 to 51 until August then? What I see here is that we are making a tightening where we're saying it's KEEP, which would exclude Acadians now, correct? If we pass that in May, but then it will be reconsidered later. And am I overlooking, is there a DIVLS? Is that already subsumed? I forget the kindergarten options.
DIVLS is Acadians.
Yeah, DIVLS and Acadians are the same thing.
That's
Remember
right.
the code until May 5th. May 5th is the effective date essentially of HB 477. Until May 5th, KEEP is the system we use by code. Now 477 now delegates that to the board, which you do have the authority to make that change. The question is whether the system is ready for that change in 4 or 5 months, because the board would not be approving that until May, and whether you wanted to give an opportunity to stakeholders to give feedback. So I guess that was the decision point of staff, to just stick with the existing what's in code and just move that to rule for now. But then in August, with plenty of time for stakeholder feedback and then time for the system to change assessments, move that way. That was our thinking. But you could eliminate it, but the board does need to designate a single assessment. The code used to list KEEP. Now it says the state board shall designate an assessment. So we do need to either say KEEP or Acadians.
By May.
And right now, I think the recommendation was to choose KEEP because the rest of the system hasn't been made aware that actually the board is considering that.
Okay, we have to do that by May then, correct? We have to do this part now.
By fall, when they would start doing these administrations in August. And yes, legally, the legislation takes effect on May 5th. And so ideally, it would be good to make that change before the school year starts, because they start those assessments in in August.
Thank you. I see Chair Member Davis's hand up. She might have more clarity than me on this. I just was worried about saying one thing now and one thing in August and getting feedback from stakeholders in between, and whether that muddies it to have this out there while we're still under consideration. But I'll be quiet. Thank you for the feedback.
And just to clarify, the August changes would be for the 24-25 school year, just like 419. We'd be taking the board's time to then signal to the system, hey, here's the schedule changes and here's the assessment changes for fall 24.
Vice Chair Davis.
That's all I was going to say. I think we move forward with this now, reconvene in August and decide, and then start that for the 24-25 school year.
Okay. So the motion before the board, before the committee is that the committee approves R277489, draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Board members, go ahead and please vote. That appears to be unanimous. Is that what you have, Cami?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right, so our next action item is number 2.7, R277-407, school fees amendment. Again, we have Deputy Superintendent Stallings.
Thank you. And Barbie is also, Faust is also here with us. Just as a reminder, I know that we discussed school fees. I want to say it was in January in the Finance Committee. And you may remember the background is that the school fees reporting requirements were discussed by the board's reports and requirements task force. As part of that work, the reports and requirements task force has recommended, with support and encouragement from USBE staff, to eliminate the October 31 separate reporting requirement with the certificates of compliance, but instead to require LEAs to be prepared to share information as needed related to monitoring, et cetera. And so you can see some of the language that we reviewed in January is essentially the same. The difference in this version of the rule, and I'll also just remind you another, oh, sorry, did somebody have a question? No.
I don't see one.
Okay, sorry about that. The other issue in here, we eliminated some redundant requirements, and also it strikes the language about supplemental kindergarten and LEAs being able to charge a fee. And you'll remember that when we discussed this back in January, the idea was moving that language to a kindergarten rule. But now, because of HB 477 and the funding at full WPU, this language is no longer necessary because the regular school day for kindergarten is now full day. If an LEA provides a full day kindergarten program, they will no longer charge fees because they'll be receiving the full WPU. And then the last thing I'll just remind you of is when this rule came to committee last month, there was a desire to treat revenue collected through fundraising differently than fees in general. And Board Member Davis made some requests for amendments, which the committee supported, but were contingent on language being approved by the legislature, because the definition of fee is in Utah code, and currently the definition of fee does include revenue collected via fundraising. So we had to eliminate all of those amendments that Board Member Davis suggested in January because the HB 175 did not pass. HB 175, had it passed, was going to do essentially separate out revenue collected through fundraising so that the board could then provide additional clarity on how to handle revenue addressed by fundraising. But so because of that change, we felt like this rule should come back to committee rather than going back to the board, because you may remember that the rule went to the full board in February, but we put a hold and a pause on it, waiting to see what happened with HB 175. HB 175 did not pass, and so that is why the rule is back here. Happy to answer any questions. And again, Barbie Faust is also here to answer questions.
Okay, I see Vice Chair Davis with her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions, actually. One is, will removing lines 49 to 51 result in any diminished ability to be or show compliance to school fees, laws, and rules? And then I have a second, but I can wait if others need to go first. I don't want to hog the airtime.
Could you restate the line numbers again? Board Member
49 through 51.
So I am not sure if, I don't see anything being removed on those lines.
Vice Chair Davis, did you say lines 49 through 51?
Yeah, maybe I wrote those down wrong. I thought that those were stricken.
Board Member Davis, are you looking at the version of the rule that went before the board in February or went to the committee in January? Or
I was just looking at the one that was in backup, but I can forego that question. I'm on a phone, so it's difficult to see now the documents. But I'll have, it's okay. I'll just ask my other question. So then we go back to the fact that in these group fundraisers, every penny of those group fundraisers have to be split equally amongst every team member, instead of giving the teacher, fire teacher, or what have you, any flexibility to use like 50% of those funds to help offset fee waivers or other things that the district budget may not allow. Do we have any opportunity at all to adjust what's in rule to give some flexibility to those teachers and coaches, or are we stuck for another year with zero flexibility?
that, Barbie, you may know the intricacies a little bit more of group fundraising as it's defined here. I will look really quickly to see. I'm trying to think of anything, but right now fundraising or revenue collected from fundraising is treated as a fee. And under that, fees have to be applied for the student who collects them. But Barbie, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yes, may I answer?
You bet. Thank you so much.
Barbie Faust, School Fees Fiscal Monitor. They could do optional group fundraising because that is allowed. Because it doesn't specify anything about optional group fundraising. It does talk about required group. So school did optional group fundraising. We, as the school fees team, we do not consider those school fees because they're not required. Students can or cannot participate, and the money can be used for a program, a school, a charity. So that's kind of one way they could, pay for waivers or optional activities or fund additional activities within a program.
Okay, may I follow up, Chair?
You bet. Thank you.
So that may give them some flexibility this year, except for the fact that nobody has to show up to the fundraisers. But I really do think we need to revisit this again for next year. And I'm not saying to change the whole thing. I mean, maybe 50% gets divided equally amongst the team members, but certainly there should be some discretion for our teachers, because currently for these required fundraisers, I mean, really, their only options, if they don't have enough money to pay for a fee waiver, they either going to lose the activity, or they're going to pay for it out of their own pocket, or they're going to have to go and get a private donation from a business somewhere. And that's not really equitable depending geographically where people live. So I hope that we'll just keep it in mind for next year again. Thanks.
I'd also like to add that in 407-7 3, it does say that an LEA may raise money to offset the cost of fee waivers through the foundation. So something outside outside of the.
It just, yeah, I agree. Thank you. It relies on business donations, and that sort of varies geographically. So, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Board Member Bogus.
You might have been on mute. I apologize, folks. I think I muted her.
Oh,
Oh,
it's,
okay.
it's all good. They get to look at you while
Go,
I'm talking.
go ahead, sorry.
So-
Say that again.
I just wanted to ditto what Member Davis had said. I share those concerns and maybe my question is directed towards Superintendent Stallings. Is this something we're going to continue to negotiate with the legislature? I do share Member Davis's concerns. I know we had this conversation in January. What are your thoughts on that as we move forward?
Yeah, so we actually could, after you take action on the rule today, if you wanted to, we could, the committee could make a separate motion that just directs staff to work with the legislature to allow or amend school fees provisions related to fundraising. And we could go that route, or the other option would be that Barbie and I could prepare a policy request for May and bring, if we want to start the legislative session prep for 24, we could start that in May and bring it that way. So either way, I recommend, and honestly, I think maybe this year we want to have a separate school fees bill that's just addressing this issue, and then have another bill if the board supports it, or if JLC, the districts or charters even ask for a bill related to elimination of curricular fees, for example, maybe have that be separate, because I think that the request that the board had separating revenue from fundraisers, revenue raised by fundraisers from the fee, probably wasn't a controversial issue, and had it been in its own standalone bill might have passed. But the other part of HB 175, which was making changes and prohibiting LEAs from charging certain fees, I think that's what caused that bill to not pass at the end. So yes, I think we should engage in that conversation if the board would like to, and Barbie and I are prepared to do that. And so I can quickly prepare a motion if you'd like to make that today, or based on this conversation, Barbie and I could prepare a policy request and we could bring that to the board in May through the 2024 legislative prep.
Small follow-up, Chair.
You bet. Thank you.
Superintendent Stallings, I'm wondering, and this might seem weird, but I'm wondering, could you pursue those pathways simultaneously? Or would that be redundant? Because I see the distinct differences, but I also see that both could be beneficial. And could you just help me understand and clarify? Thank you.
Yeah, I think they are redundant and will essentially achieve the same goal, but we're fine. I will tell you that if you make the motion, then Barbie and I don't have to prepare paperwork that then we would upload as backup in May. But so it's simpler. It's just a motion. It comes out of committee, then the board approves it. But I will say it might be easier for members of the public to see it under the agenda item 2024 legislative session, because sometimes this is not uncommon. We've had quite a few legislative items that come out of committee. So that is a normal course, is for items to come out of committee. But the other way to do it is just to handle it under a standalone item that's about legislative prep. So honestly, it's really about preference, and we could do both so that then we're double covered. But I don't know that it would be necessary if the committee makes a recommendation. I don't know if it's really necessary for staff to do the separate preparation, but we're happy to do it.
Well, I would like to move that language. I can maybe take this offline with you and do that, but I would like to move that language after we are done with this today.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Straight.
Yes, just a little background. 2 years ago, Representative Robertson took one of our business cases, which was to eliminate curricular and co-curricular fees. The legislative group with the superintendents and boards, they also had that same priority. This very past year, we still had that as a priority, but we didn't push it really heavily like we had the year before. And part of that was the superintendents and boards they were willing to discuss with the legislature ways of funding, but that became the issue in Robertson's bill. Is everyone said it's a great idea, we should do this, but when it came down to the funding mechanism and what that would mean in other areas, the 55 million versus using it for other things, they just left it more nebulous. They left it on their legislative ask, but they didn't push it so heavily because they said, we want the legislature to work with us on how this would be funded, and if there's a desire on their part. So it got a lot of less playtime this current or this last session than it did 2 years ago. But yeah, I think everyone is for a free public education. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Bogus, have you got a motion for us? Or have you got something else?
I
Nope.
apologize. I would like to carry a motion after we vote on this rule, please.
Okay, so do I have
don't
someone
want
who'd like to
disrupt, I'm sorry.
make that motion?
Oh, I thought it was made by Member Davis. I apologize, Chair Norton. I would move that the committee approves R277-407 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay, so the motion before the board, before the committee is that the committee approves R277-407 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Did you want to speak to that?
And yes, ma'am, I would just say that I really have enjoyed working with Angie this morning in that I think she's articulated well the needs for the changes in this, and that with the possible movement on the other issues, I would just ask that the board support this.
Hey, members, go ahead and please vote. Board Member Straight, did you already vote? Okay, looks like that passes unanimously. Okay, we're going to have a slight, because of our time constraints, we're going to have a slight change of,
Excuse me,
okay,
Chair.
never mind.
Could I move this
Yes.
motion?
Go ahead and please move that motion. Yes.
Oh, Angie, it disappeared for me again. I'm so sorry. I move that the committee directs staff to work with the legislature to amend school fees provisions, including amendments to the definition of fee to not include revenue raised through fundraisers and requests. The board, and that the board directs. Angie, is that like a double paste?
Well, it's because normally you're requesting it, but then the board also needs and recommends, I guess it's recommends. And recommends that the board direct staff to do the same. Does that make sense? Because the committee is approving it, but then the board actually will need to direct it. So this will end up being the motion for the board.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So then I'm just going to pick up right there and recommends that the board direct staff to work with the legislature to amend the school fees provisions, including amendments to the definition of the word fee, not to include revenue raised through fundraisers.
Board Member Straight, do you have a comment to
I'd
this
like to make-
motion?
I'd like to amend. I'd like to add JLC and put that at the first, that we work in conjunction, that we work with JLC to come up with a common ask of the legislature. Between the two, then it funnels to the legislature.
Did you say to just work with JLC on this?
Yes, I think we need to include JLC.
So are
And
you
then-
just saying that you want to insert right there where it says that the board directs staff, that you add in the phrase?
The board work with staff and JLC come up with a plan to work through the legislature.
So I think it would look like this. Sorry. I must have.
Board Member Bogus, would that be a, yeah, that kind of a friendly emotion?
Honestly, I don't know that the motion as it was written precludes that collaboration, but I would like to see the board and our staff lead out on this. And to that end, I would ask that the committee vote on that language. Because I don't want to mandate collaboration. I want our staff to take the lead on this. And the language as it was written doesn't preclude collaboration, but it doesn't demand it. And
Okay.
would like to keep us in charge and in the driver's seat.
Okay. Vice Chair Davis?
We could invite JLC to advocate with us. I don't, they're usually their legislative asks that are formal are the biggies, like big WPU, things like that. But I think we certainly could invite JLC to advocate with us, but we can't, I don't know that we can mandate things.
I would consider that to be friendly to the amendment. I think that's better wording.
So Board Member Straight, your amendment would be that the committee invite JLC to the motion?
Yes, it's put forth by
Okay.
Member Davis.
Okay, so the amendment to the motion before the board is Board Member Straight's amendment, which is that the committee invite JLC and to the motion.
Well, I think it needs to be invite JLC to advocate.
Board Member Straight, do you consider that friendly?
Absolutely. I think that's even better.
Okay, so Board Member Straight's amendment to the motion is that the committee add and invite JLC to advocate for the legislative change. Seeing no further questions, board members, please vote on that amendment to the motion. Cami, can you see the results?
Yes, I show Bogus opposed on that one.
Okay, so that passes 4-1. So now we bring forth the motion, which is that the committee directs staff to work with the legislature to amend school fees provisions, including amendments to the definition of fee, not to include revenue raised through fundraisers, and recommend that the board directs staff to work with the legislature to amend school fees provisions, including amendments to the definition of fees, not to include revenue raised through fundraising, and invite JLC to advocate for the legislative change. Any questions, comments? Okay, go ahead and please vote. All right, it looks like that passes. Cami, do you have the count?
I show that one passed unanimously.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to make some changes on the agenda. We're going to skip down to informational item 2.9.1. That looks like we only have about 14 minutes left, and we would really like to get this program monthly report on USIMS. This is our month for the deep dive. So if you would go ahead, let's see who we got running. Oh, Katrina's here. Good. Jared Felt and Katrina. Great. Thank you both.
All right. Thanks, Madam Chair and board members. Appreciate this time to let us give you a monthly, we do this once a quarter, deep dive into the USIMS project. And so I'm just going to turn it over to Katrina and she'll take it away. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, I guess now, board members. My name is Katrina Brinkley. I'm the Chief Product Owner and Program Manager for USIMS. And we will try to get through this as quickly as possible today. So I will skip a couple of, well, first off, let's share my screen here. Can everybody see the PMR?
Yeah, we're good, Katrina.
Yep. Thank you. And now, where do I go for the slideshow? There we go. So I'm just going to skip the review slides and head straight into our first little bit here. First off, I'm sure all of you got a chance to review. Are there any questions that you have on slides 1 through 7 before we move forward?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay, all right, we will move on. Tim has decided to desert us today because apparently it's spring break. So I will be covering his team's update for this quarter. This is the educator team, also known as Skywalkers. The team members are listed here. Since last quarter's update, we do have one new member, that's Ravi. He's joined as a software developer on the team. We are also looking for another software developer for this team right now. And moving on, I will be blunt. This team has been struggling a little bit with some production issues for the last probably 6-ish months now. We thought we had them in place last quarter, and we have actually spent time this quarter really diving into those production issues and into what defects are existing and how they're coming up and where they're going. And the team has put a lot of effort into stabilizing our production environment and working on bugs and defects within the system. They're currently finishing up that work, hopefully within the next couple of sprints, and then they'll be moving on to professional licensing and associate license renewal. And then they'll be working on some of the Cactus feature subsumption. That is really the bread and butter of this team. We're also working on assessing changing legislative requirements within our focus working group. So does anyone have any questions on the educator team on Skywalkers?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. In that case, if it is all right, I would like to turn some time over to our product owner for the student team. This is Mark Wattups.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Just gonna try and brush through these quickly, but we've added a few new members to our team as Trina talked about. We're trying to across USIMS to get additional hires to speed up the work, and we have 2 new folks that have just started and one that starts on the senior developer that starts on Monday. So the only call out there is we're getting some senior developer experience in that's going to help us as we try and accelerate our work. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's a lot to cover on this. I'll try and keep it brief. We continue to work on the assessments. We're building out the foundation across the entire assessments process as best we can. That allows our team to understand what the business needs are and avoids creating siloed functionality that we're trying to now piece together along that process. So we're just finishing up the student rostering so that we have at least the functionality in place. And then as we progress on that, we're also, as I mentioned, on the up next portion there, we're trying to finish kind of that the functionality across that business process. Then we're going to come back and start diving into specific assessments with that foundation in place. Think of it like a house, that we're building out the foundation so that now we've got a structure that we can build the rest of the house on. One thing to call out would be we're just starting the very initial discussions with Aspire. So within this next quarter, we're going to be talking to them about specific information for assessments and how we get that from Aspire as a way to start testing out the APIs that we've created. Yeah, and I think I covered this. As once we're finished with this, we're going to be diving into the specific business requirements with RISE. We have much of those, but there's still some discussion later, actually this month, with our vendor who helps provide the RISE assessment called Cambium to make sure that we've got the data, and we're only sending the data that we need to them to protect student identity and such. Outside of that, we're just working to add 2 additional team members to our team to help us kind of divide and conquer and speed up the work that we're trying to do for not only assessments, but we'll start looking at student identity and student records. Any questions? I went pretty fast there.
Hey,
You
Mark.
did, but thank you. I'm not seeing any.
Okay. Jared, did you have a question?
Yeah, Vice
No.
Chair or Madam Chair, is it okay if I just mention one thing?
Great.
So the API, Mark, did you explain what an API is, just for the good of the group?
I didn't. It's an API is basically like, this is not the best analogy, but think of it like if you have 2 extension cords with power, then if you're plugging one end into the other, that's how an API works. It's just really the mechanism by which we send data back and forth from one source of data to the other. And it's much more secure than sending flat files, or for those of you that are technical, it's a more secure way than for us to send and exchange information. Thanks, Jared. Sometimes I forget when I'm in in the throes of things, I forget that not everybody knows what an API is.
Yeah, that's kind of education, isn't it?
Yeah, my
Right.
wife chastises me all the time saying, hey, you assume I know all this stuff, and I don't. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All right, and Chair, if I may, we'll turn the time over to Don Moody, who is our product owner for the finance domain.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, everyone. So a couple of updates that I wanted to share with you all very quickly. The first being that in the finance domain, one of our main priorities is to make sure that we can automate these submissions between the third-party platforms that are used at the LEAs, whether it be like a Tyler Technologies, a Link, or a Skyward. There's about 7 different vendors that have have potential API capabilities that we're working to automate the sharing of budget and transaction information into USIMS. So we actually launched with a few of the vendors. We launched an initial API in the last couple of weeks, and we actually received some constructive feedback from one of our vendors here in the last week or so. And with that feedback, we're making some adjustments to our API to make sure that it is something that we can pilot across with all of our vendors, because a couple of the vendors that we're working with, we just need to make sure that we're asking the same thing for across everyone. So again, good feedback there that we're working on in the coming weeks to get that up and automate the data sharing. The team is also working to, in our focus working group, we have provided a number of demos to show like how different users in USIMS can search for different account codes within the USB chart of accounts, how they can look at different details. So as a follow-up from those demos, we're actually in the process of cleaning and checking that code into an environment that we can make available to the two members of the focus working group. So we're in the coming hopefully couple weeks we'll be able to provide that. It's something that our team's been working really hard on as well. And then just a couple other areas real quick. We're also working on with the management of the chart of accounts and USIMS. We're also implementing ways by which we can keep track of, okay, when changes are made to an account code, if there's updates or if it's retired, as different members of USB come in and out of different teams, so they can look at the history of, okay, here's what's happened with this program or with this particular fund, just from automating that transaction history, and also looking at similar to what we're doing with the chart of accounts, doing the same search functionality with the rules to help simplify how LEAs are able to map things to different rules. So that's kind of the quick summary with what's happening in the finance domain. Did anyone have any questions for me?
I'm not seeing any questions. Good work.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Don. Our next slide here is on financials for USIMS. We are still looking good. As far as funding, as previously mentioned, we're beginning to use ESSER funds currently, and we will move on to ARP funds once we have expended the ESSER funds. We still have funds in the 20 USIMS, 18 USIMS, and 17 USIMS funding sources.
Katrina, are the USIMS funds aren't lapsing, are they?
Not that I am aware of.
Okay. I know the others are, but.
Yes, the ESSER and ARP funds are time limited, but I do not believe that the 2018 and 17 are time limited.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming Deborah or Scott will correct me if I'm wrong here. And then I've just added in this chart to kind of show you our spending by budget fiscal year, to give you an idea of what we're spending per month here. And then I have broken it down into the two budgets that we're currently spending against. And you'll notice the spikes here in November. Again, the PO was closed, so we updated. I see Jared turned his camera on. Does that mean you have a comment, Jared? Okay. All right. And before I move on from the financials, are there any other questions?
Nope.
Okay. And the fun stuff. So I would like to highlight the focus working groups that we have going on for each team. Those happen every other week, and they are open to subject matter experts, business experts, people who have knowledge in these current systems and want to share that information. We're happy to invite those who want to participate. We also are doing a functional advisory board that happens once a quarter. It's happening on April 25th, and we are actually doing that in the office this time. We are having an on-site for all of the USIMS teams. We're flying them all in from all over the US to have an on-site in person. So if you would like to join us on that day, it is on April 25th. I believe it's from 3:30 to 5. I will get exact times for everybody. But we would welcome everyone to come participate, meet the teams, spend some time. We're also doing the majority of the focus working groups on that day so that everybody can meet each other and have conversations. And that is what our next slide is about. Oh, it's at 4 p.m. My apologies, I lied. But here's how the focus working groups are set up. We have the boardrooms saved for all day that day. So we will be having great conversations and hope that we can see all of you there.
Wonderful.
That is my update, Chair.
Thank you. Anything you would like to add onto that, Director Felt?
No, thank you for giving us the time. Like Katrina said, you're welcome to any of these focus working group meetings. This is where stakeholders from different LEAs participate in the development of USIMS and provide their feedback, and this is what the teams go off of when they're developing the USIMS capabilities. So you're welcome to join us anytime. But thank you and appreciate the time.
Appreciate that very much. Back to Assistant Superintendent Jacobson. Do you have anything further for us today?
Other than if the final item is for any requests for data. So again, that's just open to you as committee members, if you need any information from staff.
Okay, so you have an open invitation. Anybody have anything right off? Okay, it looks like we're a couple of minutes over. If you do have any of those data requests, you can get those into Scott and he will send it out to whomever in the department could best handle that. Special thanks today for all the staff who did so much of the lifting and the preparation to get this ready today. And I wish we would have got through all the information items, but we did not, but we did a great job on those heavy, heavy action items. So congratulations, team. And we have a full board meeting with USDB in about 40 minutes. So go grab some quick lunch. Cami, did you get all the numbers that you needed?
I did, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate your awesome support. Okay, everybody, see you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.